Good afternoon, everyone. Perfect. Good afternoon. So, as the name of the title suggests, right, I'm going to talk about digital disruption in the world of procurement, especially in Africa, right? And some of you have even filled a survey that we launched a couple of weeks back. So that gave us a good insight of what you want out of that session, right? So let me give you a quick snippet of what we are witnessing in the past couple of years, right? Last couple of years have been extremely challenging, especially for supply chain professionals like us, yeah? Firstly, the COVID. I think, COVID has been a real testing time for all of us. And I'm not going to talk too much about COVID. And then, unfortunate incident, sewage canal blockage. Can anyone give a wild guess how much was the loss that we suffered due to the sewage canal blockage? Anyone? Any guesses? How much?
15 billion US.
You're absolutely right. 15 billion US dollars. And then, more recently, the war. So what is the impact of all these incidents for people like us, the supply chain professionals, right? It has been a real testing time for all of us. We also ran a quick survey with all of you. And despite all these challenges, I thought the survey results would change a little bit. But unfortunately, it didn't. Because out of these 4 drivers, which is around driving savings, supply assurances, digitization, and developing talents, guess what? Which is the topmost priority for any organization? Driving savings. Actually, 50% of you guys have mentioned that driving savings is the key priority for most of you. And I'm not surprised at all. But I thought supply assurances will actually overtake that. But anyways, this is what you guys have said. For the first time, we have witnessed that digitization is becoming a key driver for transforming procurement organizations. Now, let's talk a little bit about driving savings, right? It's easier to say driving savings, but, commodity prices shot up by at least 2x in the last few months, yeah? The price that I was paying for gasoline for my car, actually I'm paying 2x in the recent past, yeah, than what I was paying probably in January before the war. So definitely in these circumstances, having right set of processes to drive savings becomes extremely critical for all of us. Yeah? So driving analytics to have better insight on your spends, running category management functions if you don't have any, and leveraging advanced negotiation techniques. I think these are critical elements to drive cost savings. The second one is mostly around supply assurances, right? Now, the good thing is that we have tools in place. But the bad thing is that not everyone is using that, yeah? So the real challenge for us is not to collaborate with the internal organizations, the 4 walls of our own companies, but also to collaborate with the outside world. And that has become a big challenge for most of our organizations. Anyway, I'll talk about more about this in a minute. Third is about digitization. I think this is picking up. A lot of organizations now understand the need for digitization. Gone are the days where you can have manual processes and still get great benefits for your organization. Because the challenge today is, one thing that COVID has taught us, more we digitize, I think better it is for all of us. And lastly, developing talents. I think this is extremely critical because you want your employees to be doing more of the strategic work. Unfortunately, 60 to 70% of procurement professionals' work is actually dedicated to more operational and tactical stuff, which they should not be doing, right? So these are 4 things that we heard from you. I think, savings and supply assurances remain the top 2, and digitization is catching up. The role of CPO, or Chief Procurement Officer, is now evolving to becoming more of a Chief Value Officer. Gone are the days where procurement professionals will be really as a back office function. Procurement professionals are now becoming more of a profit center for many organizations. They're actually representing the board, right? So can you give me one example where a CPO has been elevated to a CEO? Apple. Who is the Apple CEO? Anyone? Tim Cook. So Tim used to be the Chief Procurement Officer for Apple, and now he has been elevated to become the CEO of the organization. This never happened in the history, right? But we are now seeing more and more of these Tim Cooks getting the board level places in the organization. Now, this is a McKinsey survey. It's not my survey, right? McKinsey actually said that the value of digitization is immense. Now, think of the spend of your organization, right? If you're a $2 billion company, right? You are in a position to save at least about 3 to 4%, right? If I just put the median of that 3.5% savings, if you're a $2 billion company. So that means 70 million straight in your bottom line. This is through better compliance, better control and governance in your existing processes, enhanced efficiency, and lastly, reduction in your cost of purchases, right? So really, this slide means a lot to people like us because we believe that, the value of digitization has to be extracted to its fullest level. Now, here's the question. How digital is your supply chain and procurement function? Any guesses? Because a lot of you have filled the survey. What would be the survey result? Okay, without wasting much time, this is the survey result that we heard from you. 50% of you guys have responded that you have some sort of digital strategy and you have initiated that in your company, which is great. 12.5% responded saying that you are yet to initiate something as far as the digital transformation is concerned. And a lot of you have even mentioned, which is 37.5%, have mentioned that you haven't started your digital transformation process. Now, this is a big concern because, I think we are towards the end of the pandemic leg. And if you haven't started your digital transformation now, chances are that, you will have a massive challenge if you compare against your peers, right? So that's the reason I believe that you must address this 37% whosoever haven't started, right? Because it's no longer a royalty, but more of a necessity these days. So it's time to reimagine your procurement function. Now, as SAP, this is our yesterday, right? So what we used to have long back, the classic ECC system that we used to have. And then we evolved ourselves. So we introduced what we call it as today's procurement process. And tomorrow's processes will be more through digital assistance. And these are things that SAP is doing as far as digital transformation is concerned. Now, a lot of you would have heard, or if not, the core solutions that we have from an SAP standpoint, what we call it as intelligent spend and business network, is SAP Ariba, SAP Fieldglass, and SAP Business Network, right? These are three core solutions which manages the end-to-end procurement, right? And this is where we are working towards and helping customers to move to the next leg of their journey. Now, the world we all know has evolved. Gone are the days, as I said, that we will be able to collaborate within the four walls of the boundary. We need to have better collaboration outside the four walls of the organization. I wish procurement just would have been, buyer-supplier relationship. But along the process, there are so many stakeholders, right? Be it contract manufacturers, be it logistics provider, be it your end customers, be it your banks with whom you have some sort of relationship, or maintenance providers, right? So we need to connect all of these dots together, right? And and let me give you an example, right? All the new generation, I would say, companies that is coming up with those innovative apps and innovative ideas. Let's say take the example of Uber, right? What is the difference between Uber versus somebody who is just driving a taxi? What is the main difference? The main difference is Uber helps us as customers to collaborate with all the chauffeurs who is around you. And this is exactly the concept of SAP Business Network. We have built a business network, and this is an effort that has gone for over 2 decades, where we help organizations to connect with all the different stakeholders that you can see in the process, right? And this actually helps us to do, maybe, simple collaboration for purchase orders, invoices, to more complex one, which is more around inventory collaboration, to more complex ones where we actually want banks to be on the network as well, right? So that's the beauty of the business network. That's the concept that the world is going for, right? And today's big challenge, as I said, has been the siloed system. A lot of us do have some sort of processes to connect with your suppliers. But not every time that supplier is your end supplier. Sometimes that supplier outsources it to contract manufacturers. How do you get visibility to that? A lot of times it's a point-to-point collaboration, right? And this is actually restricting us to look into the big picture. And also inability to adapt to real-time change. So I think these are some of the major challenges that we are seeing. And the value of SAP Business Network is to bring all the trading partners together, right? What we have witnessed is by doing so, you can actually help a lot in terms of driving savings, a lot in terms of driving efficiencies, a lot in terms of, for example, simple processes like touchless invoices, right? So these are basics of procurement process. And if you recall my first statement when I said 60 to 70% of time for a procurement professional goes wasted in manual, tactical activities. And we need to elevate that because that is not something that you should be doing. Going with the motion, as I said, it's an effort for the past 2 decades, right? We have built the business network, and fortunately, over the last 2 decades, we have built a business network that has more than 6.7 million trading companies, right? Now, what it means is every customer who is joining our solution, like SAP Ariba, all your suppliers embark on the similar journey, because that's where you actually get the collaboration. With the help of 4,000 plus SAP Ariba and SAP Fieldglass customers, we have been able to onboard 6.7 million plus suppliers, and it's adding every single day, every single minute, right? almost about $4.3 trillion of commerce happens through the Ariba network. 250 million transactions happen over the Ariba network, and you must be happy to hear that only in South Africa, we have over 160,000 plus suppliers who have already embarked on the Ariba journey or SAP Business Network journey. And almost $1.1 million of transactions, that happens through the Ariba network, only in South Africa. Yeah, so these are massive stats, and this is the largest business network globally in the world as well as in Africa. Now, if you hear the first slide, right, what was the problem statement that we are trying to solve? Minimize supply chain disruption, right? And I believe that it can be done in 4 ways. The first one is, how can we minimize supply chain? And one of the ways to do that will be ramping up alternate sources of supply. I think that's one of the ways to help organizations to minimize the supply chain disruption. But at the same time, I think it's extremely important to monitor the risks within the supply chain as well. We are actually having a lot of trouble when it comes to connecting or gaining visibility from the outside world. And that's the reason it's very important to monitor the supply chain risk across your value chain. The second one, I'm not taking the credit that you mentioned, optimizing cost. I think this is extremely important. And how can you have more advanced techniques to optimize your cost, right? The third one is about working capital management or increasing the cash conversion cycle. So from the cash conversion cycle, I think it's where we don't want to be in a situation, especially in these days, where, one wrong planning and you have built up such a large amount of stock that you're not able to exhaust that stock. So how can the system help and gain visibility so that you don't make those mistakes ever? And fourth one is, not every organization you are planning for goods, right? A lot of organizations, our biggest spend category is services procurement, right? So how do you manage that services procurement in the most optimal way, right? And that's the fourth theme. So these are 4 themes I'm going to talk about in the next 10 minutes or so. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me and ask it, right? All right, minimizing supply chain disruption. So this is the first, solution, that really helps organizations to minimize the supply chain disruption. So monitoring the risk within the supply chain. Our solution has a risk monitoring capability as well, where you can actually witness the risks that is there. Risk could be from financial risk, it could be disaster sort of risks, it could be even risks which is related to, child labor maybe, sustainability, right? So how do you actually get those external information to the buyers who are actually doing this stuff? Before placing any order to a supplier, you want to make sure that your supply chain is robust, and you want to make sure that everything is clean. Because what you don't want is there is lockdown in China, and you have placed a big order within China, which they are not able to deliver within the next 6 months, and you know that this can actually disrupt your supply chain function. So monitoring the risk is extremely important, and it should be done on a real-time basis, right? So our solutions has capabilities to source risk feeds from different sources, in fact, 600,000 different sources, and give that information to that buyer, right? So that's about monitoring risk. The second one is, if you recall, I said we have built what we call it as the SAP Business Network, which has over 6.7 million trading companies, right? So how do you get the ability to identify new sources of supply? And this is where SAP Business Network really helps organizations. So gone are the days when you get a requirement from your end user and you start going through your Yellow Pages or Google and start calling people. It's a very different kind of search that you're doing. You put your request on the SAP Ariba Discovery, and suppliers will reach out to you. Exactly the way I gave the example for Uber, where somebody places the request and whosoever is the nearest cab driver who would come to pick you up, it works exactly in the same concept, right? So identifying alternate sources of supply. If you want to test it out, please go to myariba.com/discovery. Yeah. The next one I'm going to talk about is improving the cash conversion cycle. Inventory, right? While we want to avoid as much as we can, but unfortunately we can't, right? Because our processes are not just in time, unfortunately. We want to have it a just in time process, but unfortunately it's not the case always, right? Now, as I said, it's all about collaborating with your suppliers end to end, right? So our solutions actually allow 28 different collaborations. The simple ones, which is POs and invoices, the more complex one around logistics, even more complex ones around assets, and then you have forecast collaborations where you can have a 3-4 months forecast, and then there could be changes in that forecast. How do you communicate those changes to your suppliers, right? So it becomes extremely important to actually have that collaboration going, because if you miss out on something, you don't want to be in a situation that either there's overpiling of stocks, which is actually impacting your working capital, or you are in a stock out situation. You want to avoid that. And last but not the least, quality, extremely important. You don't want to be in a situation where you get the goods, but actually it's rejected, right? So how can you have better quality collaboration with your supplier base? So our solutions actually allow all those end-to-end collaborations, helping you to get better product, better with the accuracy, with the better forecast accuracy, limited inventory. I won't say zero inventory, but limited inventory, and also allows you to have the best quality at the right time. The second one is more around the financial supply chain. Now, there are two ways to do that. One, and this is a very recent acquisition from SAP, right? So at the time of paying your suppliers, right, if you're a cash-rich company or your treasury says, we have sufficient cash to pay our suppliers earlier, so you can actually leverage what we call it as dynamic discounting. So you offer this to your supplier through the network that we can offer you 2% or 1% discount, but I'm going to pay, instead of your net 30, net 60, whatever your payment terms is, I'm going to pay you now, which is, we still have 15, 20 days. Can we get a discount? And guess what? Sometimes cash is king for that particular supplier, because supplier can be small and they are in need of that cash. So they actually agree to that 1% discount. So that's dynamic discounting, but more relevant in the current scheme for all of us in this room is the supply chain financing, where you don't have the cash. So how can you actually allow banks to finance you for a particular PO or for a particular invoice? So banks sometimes actually helps you to do that financing, right? So you bring bank into the equation. So in South Africa, we have Standard Bank, we have ABSA, RMB, Nedbank, who are actually doing supply chain financing. So a customer or a supplier reaches out to the bank, the bank finances them, and on maturity, you actually pay the bank. So this way, you've pushed your days payable outstanding by 30, 60 days, whatever your commitment is with the bank, right? So this actually helps you to free up some cash, and this is a direct benefit to your cash flow, right? So this is a working capital benefit. So these are the two solutions that we have from a cash conversion cycle. Now, talking about improving margins, right? So we have SAP Ariba sourcing solutions where you can do all the different kinds of sourcing events, be it RFPs, be it RFIs. But the biggest one that we have seen is auctions. A lot of companies have started using auctions to negotiate with their suppliers. And this is a big benefit and a big boost for many organizations. I personally have seen, 30, 40% reduction in the pricing when companies leverage auctions, right? A lot of companies are outsourcing their sourcing as well, right? And thankfully, we have Bayajula, who is our SAP partner, and they are actually running a new campaign on outsourcing of the sourcing activities, right? So if you want to reach out to them, they are in the booth. So they're experts in running sourcing events, right? So that's something that you can definitely leverage from your side, right? So running those sourcing events in a more collaborative way and making sure that you get double-digit savings, right? This has been tried and tested. Very recently, we ran a sourcing event for a paints company in West Africa, and we received almost about $100,000 in the next hour, right? So that's immense, right? From a cost optimization standpoint. In SAP Ariba, almost about 80 to 90,000 e-auctions are being run. So almost about 200 to 300 auctions are being run every single day. Try it out, and I'm sure that can pay back your entire digital transformation. The next one is about, contracts, right? We are seeing that a lot of companies or a lot of suppliers are coming with the force majeure clause, which means that they will not be able to supply because of the external influences, right? So how do you deal with it? So you have to mitigate your risks, right? So I'm seeing a lot of companies are using digital contracts, right? And we have taken contracts to the next level. We have got different solutions for managing your contracts. So even we are exploring blockchain, which is including smart contracts in the process, so that can actually take the contract management to the next level, and also ability to sign those contracts digitally, right? So we want to avoid any paper. And last but not the least, as I said, in some organizations, it's not the goods that is the highest spend. It's actually the services, the different service providers or the contractors who are working for you. I think it's very important to manage that, because 9 out of 10 times, we don't even know who they are, what are they doing, whether they should be having the right access in your organization or not. So here's some of the stats. On an average, anyone from the mining industry? Can you raise your hand? No one. Banking? FSI, insurance, universities? No one. Oh, this industrial manufacturing? Okay. So external workers or contractors are very key to your processes, right? So 44% of the workforce in your industry, especially the ones that I mentioned, are external workers. And, as you can see, 65% of them are saying that they are very critical to your businesses, because we are in a world where we tend to outsource almost every small portions of our business, whichever is not our core competency, right? And 75%, according to Oxford Economics, do not have a holistic view of those contractors, what they're doing, whether they have the right access, right? So having that view, this is where SAP acquired the organization called SAP Fieldglass, which is now part of Intelligent Spend, right? So there are two elements of it. One is managing of the freelancers or the gig workers who are actually, you're doing the recruitment of them and then onboarding them and finally making sure that they are submitting their timesheets on time and the invoice processes. That's one side. But, probably you're also working with a lot of service providers. So how do you manage that side of it where, from a contractor, few employees are coming, they are doing their job, and then having the visibility of how much of work is being done. So that's extremely important. So here's about contingent workforce. First is about creation of the job, and then about submitting requisitions, selecting candidates, onboarding activities, submitting timesheets, invoicing, and finally the payment, right? And if there's anything, after the job, you need to offboard those employees as well. So this is where SAP Fieldglass becomes very handy, where you're making sure that you're doing all of these processes. And trust me, whatever I mentioned here is not a very easy thing. I'm doing hiring on a regular basis, but trust me, it's a very complex process, hiring of external workforce, right? And the second one is about complex services procurement, where you outsource a portion of your business to a third party. How do you make sure that you have the right engagement pattern and you administer their job in the most effective way? Right. A lot of times I've seen that these service providers come up with change requests, probably 50 or 60% of the work when it is completed with €1 million, right? With €1 million or €1 million rands. How do you get that visibility up front? What is that additional work? You don't want to be surprised towards the end that, this much of work is still pending. So that's why SAP Fieldglass is extremely critical to have that visibility across your services procurement. Just a little stats about SAP in Africa. So we have 50 plus customers, both from Ariba and Fieldglass point of view. These are customers who have been using Ariba for quite some time. And we have across, I told 160,000 across South Africa, but almost 214,000 across Africa. We have almost $11.5 billion of spend being transacted in Africa and $1.1 million transactions happening. And a lot of customers have embarked on the digital transformation. But one customer I'm going to talk about now is this customer in East Africa, right? Thankfully, they went live just before pandemic, probably 2 months before pandemic. And what they mentioned to us is this was a blessing in disguise, because if they wouldn't have transformed or went ahead with the digital transformation, probably they wouldn't have been able to run their businesses as efficiently as they are doing today. From 100% paper-based processes, you can imagine public sector, a lot of paperwork, bids, everything submitted, in the form of hard copy. They were able to achieve 100% paperless processes, 100%, right? Complete end-to-end transparency around the source-to-pay process. They went with a phased transformation. They didn't want to do everything at one go. Whatever they could consume, they took it in phase one, and then they went ahead in the second phase. And seamless digital collaboration with the buyers and the suppliers. In East Africa alone, they were able to onboard almost 3,500 suppliers, right, within that period. And that actually helped them to have a complete end-to-end digital process. I'm more than happy if you guys want to speak to to Ketraco, right? They are, and for that we have awarded them with the Procurement Excellence Award, and this is a small piece of award, as you can see, myself giving the award to their head of procurement and the chief information officer. The other one, which is very close to us, it's in South Africa, is Sasol, right? They also achieved almost 75% of the transactions. And Sasol, as you know, is a global company. It's not only South Africa, but also they're present in Europe and the US. 75% of the transactions are happening through the Ariba network. Again, it's a journey. It took time. It's a while because they had to onboard almost 25,000 plus suppliers. So that was really, really a massive uphill task. Today, they can proudly say that most of their payments are on time, because that was a big KPI for procurement, to make sure that suppliers are getting paid on time. And massive cost reduction, especially the accounts payable function is concerned. So really, I know I only have 5 minutes, but I want to leave you guys with this session with 3 key takeaways, right? Digitization is now a necessity because of all the external influences that we are witnessing from time to time, right? And we don't want to be in a situation where our plants and our manufacturing setup are getting disrupted. We want to disrupt the world, right? So change yourself before the world changes you, right? The second one, SAP offers end-to-end solutions across the source-to-pay process, right? That can help organizations to minimize supply chain disruptions, improve cash conversion cycle, and help in achieving the most critical KPI that I just showed, which is cost savings. This will help you to improve your operating margins. We've got a booth outside, so if you can visit us, we will be more than happy to talk you and walk you through our solutions in a little bit more details. And having supported over 4,000 plus customers across the globe and 50 plus customers in Africa, we believe that our solution is really robust end-to-end, and companies will get enormous benefit by adopting our solutions, right? With that, I pause for any questions, if you have any. Yes?
Sorry, there's just time for one question.
Yeah.
We run out of time. Here we go.
Okay, I've worked in organizations that uses Ariba and, of course, SAP ECC. My question is Ariba a standalone system, or is it supplementary to your ERP system?
Absolutely, very good question. So Ariba, you can utilize it as a standalone solution, but the biggest benefit that you will get if you are to integrate Ariba with your ECC or S/4HANA systems or any even non-SAP systems, right? That's where you get the biggest benefit. And we have seen from time to time, organizations realizing highest benefit if they do the integration. So you can run both standalone as well as in an integrated fashion. Yes, there's one more I can see.
One more.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just quickly.
Sorry. It's interesting about the Ariba, but what I wanted to know is many organizations have got databases of their pre-qualified suppliers.
Yes.
Do you have, or rather, is it possible to integrate an existing, supplier database with the Ariba? That is one. Two is, I really wanted to know what you mean fully by digitizing procurement, because many organizations have one form of digitalization or another. But the way you talk about it is like it's only about the list of the customers. Yeah. What do you really mean by digitization? Thank you.
Yeah, good question, right? I'll answer the first part first. So your first part was around, can you integrate the supplier database that you have? Probably a lot of companies have their own material master with the qualified suppliers, right? Definitely. So what we actually recommend is the supplier lifecycle and performance solutions that we have actually integrates with your material management, or your if you're a non-SAP customer, the supplier master, right? This is where you can do two-way integrations, right? If you're changing anything on the supplier side, let's say they are posting a document, or let's say they are updating their certificates, that should get reflected on your ERP, and vice versa, right? So that integration is definitely possible, right? I definitely recommend that if you're considering that, you must integrate, right? That's where you get the biggest benefit. To answer your second part of the question, which is around end-to-end digitization. End-to-end digitization means how can you make sure that your processes are seamless, touchless, there is minimal touch points, no manual work, right? So somebody, typing things and stuff like that, no. The problem that we are facing is, sometimes you do your P2P process, right? Because you're doing it in the ERP. But what about collaboration outside of your ERP? How can you send your purchase orders? How can you receive those invoices? And that's the end-to-end digitization that I'm talking about. I think it's extremely important to have those collaborations outside the four walls of the boundary of the organization. That is true digitization.